Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Edla Kaumbi. I am the Executive Director of the NICG. Welcome to the Fireplace and the Fireplace Conversations. This evening, I am joined by Mr. Ralph Uyuni and Mr. Johan Duplessis, and we are here talking about fraud in the boardroom, which is the theme for August. If you've been following us, you know that we started this Fireplace conversation for this year in June. We talked about ESG, talking about the E of ESG, the first series episode, and then we talked about the S of ESG. And in July, we did IT, so we talked about 5G, and then we talked about AI. And now we are going to talk about fraud and detection and risk management. The NICG exists to improve the corporate governance landscape in the country, and we do this through advocacy and thought leadership and capacity building. And the Fireplace Conversations are one such platform where we do advocacy. So please do follow us on our social media platforms, on Instagram and Facebook. And this episode will also be downloaded on YouTube within 24 hours. So welcome again. We have a very small audience, so thank you for being here. It's good to see you. And so we'll get right into it. I'm just going to have my speakers introduce themselves, please. I don't know who's going to go. Is it age before beauty, or is it?
Yeah. Thank you, Itla. Mm-hmm. We're really privileged to join the NICG. I'm reminded by something that Benjamin Franklin said, that an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. And I think F&B and First Rand is really excited to be part of this conversation and to fostering that culture of ethical behavior. So.
Thank you. I'm glad to have you here. Ralph?
Thank you. Ralph Uyuni from Development Bank. I'm a risk officer, specialized in fraud examination, and I'm also part of the board of the Namibian chapter of Certified Fraud Examiners, which recently launched in Namibia, so we're quite excited to see what happens in the years to come.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, I'm excited. So let's just get right into it. I'm just going to start with some questions here. It's especially the strategic importance of fraud detection. How can effective fraud detection enhance the strategic positioning and reputation of an organization? And maybe what are the long-term implications for a company that fails to detect and address fraud promptly? Do you want to start with that, Ralph?
Yeah, I will just start with the long-term effects, because usually we don't look at what happens to a company in the long run. So usually when we look at fraud, people are always like, no, we just stole $1 million, we stole $2 million. But when you take that amount over a long period of time, it comes out to a big amount. We have seen many companies close down because of this. Example is your Steinhoffs, and then we also have your SME Bank. But then what you would find also on the other hand is that their reputation also falls back. Steinhoff has been trying to come back into the market. Nobody trusts them again because of fraudulent activity that happened within their business. So if you used fraud to make more money, how will I trust you again to use my money? Because remember, in Steinhoff's case, we were investing pension funds into this company, I would say. And then when you look at the legal implication, there's a long legal process that goes within after fraud is found within a company, because you have your regulators also coming for you. So now you have lost money from a fraudulent activity, and your regulators coming, you're finding you as well. So it's a double loss that you have in the long run. So at the end of the day, that's why the company cannot sustain themselves, because they can't recover the money they lost. Plus, they need to pay some fines to the regulators. Yeah, that's the first one. I'll give over to you on the other end.
So that, wow.
But Ralph, I think it's a good point you're making, and that's why it's strategically important to position your fraud department and your fraud strategies correctly, because your reputation is so dependent on it. And I think every board will drive your reputation and the trust your reputation and your brand wants to build. And I guess, to put it differently, the more trust you build, the more your clients want to do business with you. Yeah. The more, if your client is not present and you advocate for trust and you advocate for protection, for fraud detection and prevention, that also builds trust in your clients. So that is a strategic importance of fraud risk management.
Right.
And I think setting the tone from the top, making it a priority.
100%. I mean, that sounds like we're talking about building an ethical and corporate culture, which we'll get to. So let's put a pin in that. I love that you bring that up. It's so important. I mean, especially for me as an ethics practitioner, my heart beats warmly. So maybe let's just take it step by step and from the beginning. What is the role? What would be the strategic role of a fraud examiner? I know King 4 talks about it. I mean, they don't say you must have one, but they say as part of combined assurance, it is good to have, with internal audit and then fraud examiners as well. So from a governance perspective, how critical is the inclusion of fraud examiners in corporate oversight, and what value do they bring?
So if you look at the role of your internal auditors, they are not there to look at fraud. They're not supposed to go further than if they find fraud. So what happens in most companies is your internal auditor will just highlight the fraud, but nobody goes and looks at the fraud. So then this issue will stay as a high level, high risk finding for the rest of the year. And then come the next year, it's another high finding. Nobody looks into it. By having fraud examiners within your companies, they are able to look deeper into this issue, reducing that risk from a high level to a low level over the next year. Also, as when we look at fraud that happens in a company, by the time the fraud is detected, and by the time you need to appoint a fraud examiner externally, we're talking in a space of 2 to 3 months. And what happens within that space is, because, like we said, the word spreads around the company very fast. Yeah. The implicated staff might start deleting information, and by the time the external forensics comes into play, most of the data is gone. But if you have a forensic examiner within the company, once the fraud has been detected, they can start the investigation from the back end without the perpetrators knowing that they're being looked at. And by the time they actually realize that they're being looked at, is the information has already been secured, and then if they then delete the information, then it supports the fraud, because why would you delete something? And also as a fraud examiner, as you know what's outside in the market, you know what the new trends are, and then you try and promote, be proactive, if you want to put it that way, because in most cases we are more reactive. So those one of the advantages, I would say, having a fraud examiner within the space. They go deeper than your internal auditors, and in most cases you would find is these fraud schemes are quite complex. Right. So you need somebody with a complex mindset to look at those complex issues, and obviously it's something that also takes a lot of time and a lot of mind work into it. Okay. Yeah,
Jan, do you want to add to that, especially because that sounds like your fraud examiner being in the operational space. Now, what would that look like to have a fraud examiner? Like, what value would they bring on from an oversight perspective or board perspective?
I think they bring immense value. So I think at an oversight level, with their level of experience and how they participate and guide the conversation, and one question a fraud examiner will ask that really drives immediately to the point is, don't tell me, show me. And that's really to the heart of a problem. I think also most fraud examiners, like the qualified ACFE members, they apply a level of professional skepticism. So they don't take things at face value. They really evaluate what is being said. And most of the time we find that is almost the first step to identifying, to creating that suspicion that something isn't adding up.
Yeah. Which takes us to what approaches should board take in assessing fraud risks within an organization? How do they prioritize risk in the context of a role? Yeah. What does that look like? Oh, is that what you just answered now? No.
So definitely the most important approach is setting the right tone at the top. Right. And so making fraud an agenda item, giving it the right amount of attention. And attention means budget, the right qualified people, giving them skills and exposures. Right. In FirstRand, we've sent some of our staff to other countries to gain a broader level of experience. That's also important. And then setting the tone is not only raising it on an agenda item, but it's also walking the talk. It is, if we say it's important, it must show, and in our behavior as well.
Okay. So maybe let's talk about that. Let's talk about building an ethical corporate culture. How can boards play a strategic role in cultivating corporate culture? I know you said, it's good to set the tone at the top. But what does that look like in terms of, I'm just thinking, board conversations and, in terms of strategy, what would that look like?
So,
governance frameworks, what would those be?
I think, so if you want to start at the framework level, it is really important to articulate your fraud framework, your fraud policies well, so that people understand it. They understand how you tie into to the consequences of fraud,
Right.
to the legal framework, the criminal and the civil part of it. But the most important part is the fraud prevention, the training, doing product assessments and making sure that your products are robust, they can stand up against fraud, that your controls can detect fraud if it does happen, that your clients understand how to protect themselves, that your staff are confident to speak up. And that's maybe one of the most important things of fostering a good culture, is protecting people when they do speak up, making them feeling safe
Right.
to put the issue on the table.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you want to add to that?
So the other thing I would add to that is when it comes to protecting people, you have your frontline employees would want to report certain stuff, but then if you don't have that feeling that the board will protect you from above, because now you're seen as a whistleblower, you're an outsider, nobody would want to report anything happening within the company. So if the board is able to give the assurance to the employees to say, look, if you are a whistleblower, we protect you. If you are found guilty of some fraudulent activity, you're out. So by setting the tone from the top in that sense, it makes the employees who wants to do fraud a bit scared, and the ones who are out there to help the company look out for fraud, it makes it easier for them to report fraud. Because at the end of the day, your frontline employees are your first line of defense. So if they don't have assurance from the board, if a fraudulent activity is happening within their space, they will just look at the side and say, I didn't see that. But at the end of the day, I usually say is, if you see a fraudulent activity happening, and you ignore it, at the end of the day, all of us are gone if the company closes down.
Yeah.
So if you take an example of SMA Bank, you can't tell me there's nobody that saw the money flowing through the bank accounts. But because you didn't have assurance from the board to protect you, you just laid back and left everything.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess that comes back to witness protection and to what extent the organization does, but also the country with regards, because I don't know that law has been promulgated yet with regards to witness protection. So what does that look like, and how can boards do better with regards to this? Is it, what do we do with witness protection, for example?
Yeah, so I think the first step is to talk about the structures that the company has put in place, and in most companies, there's when people are confident, there's a direct method of reporting it, and when they are not confident, then there's indirect methods. Most companies use external audit lines for the reporting of it. And when they suspect that fraud is at a higher level, and that's normally when intimidation also creeps in, then we get independent investigators. To investigate the fraud and to provide that level of comfort that there won't be manipulation, there won't be interference.
Yeah. Okay. Maybe just speaking of that, it's probably not the scope of this conversation, but I was just wondering, as a fraud examiner, at board level, what are some of those things to look out for? What would be some red flags or indicators of that there might be fraud? Or is it just the reports that come up, or how does it work?
Sometimes it depends on what the question is, because sometimes if you're a board and you tell your company that you want performance, they're going to give you financials with performance. They're going to cook the book to make sure that everything is sound. But then it's a question where you then ask is, what's the change between the last month and this month reporting? Obviously, if there's a change in the transactions, you further query. You don't just go on the word that you said. And that's why we have your sub-committees as well, where you engage more with operational staff to further question the stuff. And I think sometimes the board just takes everything at face value, and then at the end of the day, if everything goes south, the question was being asked is, where was the auditors? But then if you look in the space of the auditors again, as they're not supposed to look at a fraud. Yeah. So what has happened also is to somehow help the board from an auditor perspective is that some auditors now have forensics examiners as part of their team to ask the relevant questions when you're speaking to the financial manager or the CFO, because some of us body language answers that is only a fraud examiner can pick up when a CFO is lying. So yeah. Yeah.
Are you speaking from experience? My goodness.
No, I'm speaking from experience because I can give an example. We once did an engagement with one of the audit teams, and we ask them, is there any fraud happening? Because they just have like a checklist where they ask 2-3 questions, and you ask the CFO, is there any fraud questions, any fraud activities happening in the company? And the answer is no. They came back to us and we told them, no, there's a fraud manager within that company. Ask for his report. He came back with a 7-pager.
Wow. Right.
So now,
So it's asking the right questions.
Yeah, so as auditor now, your skepticism needs to come in play. But again, it's not where they're trained to do, and that's why we're saying your fraud examiners come into play. And also, as when we look at board level, when you're having your audit meetings, it's usually just audit reports. The question is, where's the fraud reports? Ask the relevant question just to figure out where are we within the company, because then you will get the answer of, yeah, it's $1 million. You know, with a big bank, $1 million is nothing if it's fraudulent. It's always something, yeah. But if you look at it from a bigger picture, they'll be like, it's a small amount of money. But once you go deeper into it, you'll actually realize that the money stolen is actually much more than that. So yeah.
Okay.
But I like your point about asking the right question.
Yeah.
And I guess through the years of experience, we've learned and saw that staff not taking those 10 days leave, when you have unreconciled suspense accounts, when you have long outstanding items on suspense accounts, when there's weak segregation of duties, when there's conflict of interest, those are normally red flags, and each one on its own is maybe not enough, but when you start putting it together, when you start overlaying complaints and client claims and audit findings and maybe a regulatory penalty, then things start cooking and showing you that you need to delve deeper.
Yeah.
But there's something we also don't look at. It's also lifestyle audits. You know, when you look at your as a board, you know how much you're paying your employees. But if you look at the employees' salaries versus the cars they drive and where they stay, it's also a red flag from a board level.
Right. Yeah. Okay. So I mean, all of these are detection and asking the right questions. So we spoke of AI the last time. We had so many views with that. So maybe let's talk about that. How can we leverage technology for governance? How can boards leverage technology to enhance fraud detection and risk management capabilities? Like, what emerging technologies should boards consider for future proofing their fraud prevention strategies? Who wants to go first?
I think currently where we are in technology is we have robotics that work behind the scene and which also supports your internal audit processes. So usually when you do monitoring of reports, it's every 3 months, every 4 months, and during those 3-4 months things can happen. But now with technology, you'll find that you have back-end technology that can do audits, and you can pull reports at any other given time. So those are some of the things that a board can implement, but obviously it's costly, and that's why we said it's something that needs to be approved at board level, because at the end of the day, it somehow does my job and the robot's job. So it's a question of, do you want to spend the money, but are you spending the money for the right reasons? And that's why we usually say you're spending money for the right reasons, because you're able to the robot will able to detect fraud much more faster than a human being. You have to put it that way.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, do you want to add to that, Johan?
So yeah, I guess your question has 2 parts, but so technology is really important. It is the future of fraud detection, fraud management, and there are various tools like artificial intelligence, but it all starts with the nature of your business. So if you are a bank like us and you have electronic transactions, then you start looking at what is preventative and indicative in electronic transactions, and you start pulling in your mobile operators, and so that's normally an early indication of where fraud can happen, especially digital fraud or mobile fraud. Then we have different IT tools that we use. We use penetration testing. We use bait emails to our staff to see if they click on the links, etc. We use different scripts for mule detection and procurement fraud detection. But if you want to get into specific IT technology available, then there's a new high definition camera that detects micro expressions under your skin. And that's an indication.
In gambling houses, I think. Yeah.
So that's an indication if a staff member is experiencing stress and is maybe lying to a question. Then there's voice technology, like voice stress analysis that you can use over a telephone or over a Teams meeting to indicate to you if your counterpart is maybe telling the truth or not.
Sure.
There's different vendors, like the SOC Radar is a website that will almost troll your digital information and highlight red flags to you. Yeah, so those are really different techniques that I think a lot of banks are already using, employing, and are really finding a lot of benefit from.
How do you determine, like, because Ralph spoke of earlier in terms of you understand the money or not, how can we help boards? What are the things that boards maybe should consider whether they should make the spend or not? What are some of the things that we can consider?
Yeah, so I think one of the important things is to understand the direction your business is going into. And we said we are going more digital, but fraudsters are definitely going more digital faster than the corporates. And it is investing in front of a curve. It is really getting your staff to understand the tools, using the tools, and only by using it you start getting more efficient and proactive. So I guess board, when they see the value and the potential future value, they buy into it. We start making that investment into the technology.
Yeah, that's really good. I guess it also talks about, how part of it, it's a preventative measure. What are the most effective governance ones? Are there, is there something that is most effective, or is it just, in terms of culture, or what would work? What would be the best way to prevent fraud, especially from a board's perspective?
The best prevention of fraud is education. Educating your clients and your staff. And it's not a once-off, it is continuous, it is repeatable.
Right.
It is using different technologies and different approaches.
Okay. Do you want to add to that, Rolf?
One of them would be something that's very controversial, which we usually find with HR, is when you look at your turnover rate of employees.
Okay.
The longer employees stay within a company, the longer they get smarter, the longer they hide those illicit funds. So one of the preventative measures to put in place would also to have a certain rate of turnover per year, or given your strategic measures.
What do you mean?
What I mean by that?
Fire people.
No, you don't need to fire people. You should also encourage people to leave at one point. It comes down to segregation of duty.
100%.
Yes, and then also the other thing is if you're not firing people, it doesn't necessarily mean you fire someone. You encourage people to move into other departments.
Oh, okay.
Because then what happens is, if I sat in a role for, let's say, 4 years, and I committed fraud, the question will be, well, there's another job that opens up, but you don't want to take it. Why not? Because you don't want someone else to come into this space and find out what you've been doing for the past 4 or 5 years. So it's one of those things that we also look at to say, look, what's the turnover rate, what's the movement of the employees within the company? Yeah, I would say that as well.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's interesting.
Yeah.
Do you have thoughts about that? I mean, we did talk about the S of ESG last time, and so now that worries me a little bit.
I can understand the value
logic,
in staff moving around, and definitely new staff ask new questions and would raise tips and awareness and concerns more easily than staff that have become complacent. So there is some value in it. I guess there's also value in having your staff become specialists, and that's why I think it is important to foster a culture, the right culture and the right attitude, and really communicating why fraud prevention, fraud detection is important. And I think the one important thing about a culture is you have to hang it on an aspirational goal, like let's make Namibia great, or let's do what matters. Those aspirational goals that your staff almost wrap their hearts around. And then it becomes alive, and then they start participating.
Yeah, 100%. That's really good. Well, our audience has gotten a little bigger, and so maybe we just want to open it up at this point. Are there questions so far with regards to the conversation, some input? And I don't know if our online viewers, there are questions or so. There are no questions. Yes, we have a hand up in the audience. Very small audience, but thank you for being here. Welcome. I hope you had some sandwiches and tea. Yeah, go ahead. think so. Yeah, I can hear you.
Can you hear me? Okay, now
Wow,
I can
yes.
hear myself. Hi, thank you. Very insightful discussions thus far. My question is, let's say your company or your board has never investigated or employed a fraud risk examiner or whatever, and then all of a sudden they bring in fraud risk examiners. Is that not like a red flag for the fraudster? Like, because they would all obviously think that, like, oh, all of a sudden they're bringing in these examiners. Why? What's going on? I'm now going to be caught up, and I'm running the risk of being caught out, and so they'll start deleting stuff. How can the board prevent such triggers in the fraudster's mind?
Look, I guess if you are somebody that wants to hide something, it's a good thing that you bring in the examiners and you put the people under pressure. For me, it is all about creating the right context and culture. So for any organization, it is important to build trust. When you have competent, qualified fraud examiners, it helps in that aspiration to build trust. And if you happen to find the people that are fraudsters, then good. If they are nervous, we don't care. They're destroying value, they're destroying trust.
I think it's good to get that message out. I think often enough, and like you said about aspirational goals versus, the stick all the time. I mean, it's good to have both, that people should understand that there are consequences, but I really like when we get to the heart of the matter and to the hearts of the people, and that's, I think, what aspirational values are about and goals. Okay. Do you want to answer that question?
Bringing the fraud examiner and having the perpetrator become scared, then it means that you have stopped a scheme that has been continuing over a period of time.
Mm-hmm.
And without having that fraud examiner in space, that perpetrator would have continued with their scheme. So as soon as that person sees the fraud examiner being employed and they decide to resign, it then raises the flag, why you're resigning immediately. And in most cases, if you're setting because by doing that is you're sending a strong message out.
Right.
So this perpetrator might resign as soon as possible.
Mm-hmm.
And it will give you reasons to look into what work they've been doing. And obviously you would uncover that they might have done fraudulent activity for the past years that they've been working for you. Mm-hmm. And now you've actually put in a saving mechanism for you because now you have stopped the fraud from continuing. Yeah.
Right. I think it worries me that there would be somebody who is doing this, who's getting away with it, who is now getting scared. And I'm remembering a case from another organization where somebody also only when they went on leave that the fraud was picked up. So how do boards detect these things? Because it's obviously happening at operational level, and people are trusting each other. So now they're comfortable. So I give you both keys and whatever. So how can people at board level pick up these things, and ask these questions about, this? Because there shouldn't be one person who's getting scared because they're doing things. Because either they're having access that they shouldn't have. There isn't proper segregation of duties, or I guess maybe there could be that there's a scheme. But how can people at board level, what kind of questions or what are the things that they can see to pick this up?
Yeah, I think board is setting direction and strategy, right, and focus as well. So by creating that focus, by deciding we're going to spend money, we're going to allocate budget, this is serious, we're going to start communicating the tone from the top, mm-hmm, that already sends parts of a message. The next part is then that you do your fraud risk assessment, and that immediately starts creating pressure in each department, mm-hmm, where you ask questions about corruption questions, misappropriation of assets, other types of financial fraud questions, and in that you can apply different techniques to either identify fraud or understand where there's weak controls that could in future allow fraud to happen. Right. So I think it is from a governance point of view, board sets the tone, board approves the budget and stresses the important, management implement, you employ very qualified people, they actually drive the behavior, drive the detection, and that's the process.
Right, that's good. Do we have other questions? Oh, yes, from the audience, from the online community. No.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes, we do have from the Namibian Facebook. It says, how can we train or educate our staff to assist in identifying red flags and or loopholes in our system or
Good.
process?
All right, thank you for the question. Who is that?
Vernon Hasselman. Mrs.
Thank you, Vernon Hasselman.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay,
Oh, is that from?
I think first of all, is if you need somebody to be trained, you need to have a trainer in place, and that's your certified fraud examiner. You need to have it within your company, and then they do the training, because there's a lot of employees who don't know how a fictitious check looks like. Back in the day, we talk about checks, we're talking about invoices, we're talking about phishing emails and stuff. So by having the fraud examiner in place, they then drive fraud awarenesses within the company, and that's also how the training goes by. Because if we're honest with ourselves, in most degrees that we study, we focus on what we do, but there's no form of forensics or fraud within our subjects. So by having a fraud examiner in place, they would push to have regular trainings or quarterly trainings and refreshers, but also as they don't need to wait for trainings. The employee themselves, when they see something, they'll be like, oh, we have a fraud examiner in place. I can quickly give him a call and ask him, can you quickly look at that invoice? Does it look fake? Then you somehow highlight the areas where to look at. Then what then happens is that employee teaches the next employee. So then you don't necessarily need to have a fraud examiner having everything into place. Yeah.
I mean, you said it earlier that the best prevention is education. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, so I know Vernon Hasselman. He's quite an experienced fraud manager, a risk manager, apologies. And so Vernon, I think part of the important part is that fraud isn't only one person's job, or fraud detection is not only one person's job in the entity. And it's really about setting that culture that we protect the whole organization. So everyone needs to play a role. And the risk manager role is really important, because they connect with all those different people, and they have the ability to detect something isn't right. So really, when you do find something that isn't right, there's specialist people like the qualified fraud examiners that can zoom in on what is not right. Mm-hmm. But the first step is to get that tip. Right. And there was a report issued by the ACFE. They call it the Report to the Nations. And maybe I can just read you a few stats.
Sure, go ahead. Yes.
And so from a detection point of view, they did a survey of almost 10,000 fraud cases in 183 different countries, and then they aggregated all the information. And what they found was that 43% of fraud detected were by tip-offs. So other staff or clients or even vendors that reported the fraud. And of the tip-offs they received, 50% of that was from employees, and 1/3 came from customers. So it is really important to help your clients, your customers, and your vendors understand your zero tolerance towards fraud, and help them understand what are the most effective ways of reporting it. Yeah. And then some entities and many banks are now offering incentive schemes to help motivate people to submit that report of fraud.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, and I remember when I was in the ethics space more, there's a lot of rumors that go around, about, the safety of these whistleblowing platforms and things like that. Maybe something, what can organizations do to ensure, peace of mind for, employees or, stuff like that? What are some of the practical examples or from experience that you've seen to give employees the comfort that it is okay or that it is safe? Yeah,
the one that I've seen that provides the most comfort is using an external audit company with an independent line that is used quite frequently. It's taken really seriously because it's escalated all the way to the top, and then it filters to the investigation team. So if staff really do not feel safe, that is the best option. Right. But it is also a reflection of your culture. So if more staff feel comfortable using your internal lines, and internally you also have an anonymous line, that starts to reflect some of your culture and some of the good work that your staff do trust, but they do also choose to be anonymous.
Okay, that's good.
I think maybe just to add on that,
Yeah.
that one is that whenever we talk about the hotline, I think we don't properly do awareness onto it, training to the employees as to how is it being used, because you'll sometimes get some employees that will tell you, yeah, I hear you saying it's a third-party service provider, but I think when I call it goes to the risk manager within the company. So that's why I don't use the hotline. So I think sometimes is when you present something, there are other people who are more practical. So I think sometimes you should have like a live demonstration to show the people how the thing goes. To say, look, we're going to send an email saying, let's say, Yuan is fraudulent. And then it shows how it comes out from the third party and where it goes to. So if Yuan is fraudulent, it goes above him. It doesn't come directly to him. But that system must be shown in a live setup, and to encourage employees to like use it.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's good. Do you want to add something? Yeah.
Maybe just to Ralph, a very good point. So practical demonstrations is so valuable for your staff and for your clients.
Right.
And we recently started a campaign where we use part of our call center for early fraud detection and prevention. And we then asked a few clients if they want to volunteer to go through the hotline process and experience and give us feedback. But is the questions relevant? How do you experience the questions? And really the clients experience it very positively, that they see the bank is trying something and they feel that they are part of a solution to make it more effective.
Right. That's good.
Good point.
Yeah, thank you. Do we have more? Okay, yes, we have a question. Any questions? Oh, here's the mic. Thank you, Augusta.
Okay, great. So a lot of the discussion is around having a formalized board, but we also need to recognize that a large percentage of the Namibian economy comes from small businesses and small vendors that don't necessarily have a formalized board. What can owners of small businesses and those in the informal sector, what can they do to prevent risk and manage risk and do this whole fraud risk assessment?
100%. That's a really good question. Yeah. Do you want to take that?
I think, like we always say, we can adjust the price. So, if it's a small, medium enterprise company, obviously the work that needs to go into their businesses as to training and stuff like that wouldn't require a lot of complex stuff. So the price can be adjusted to somehow fit their budget for them to have that awareness and also use it within their businesses. Or sometimes, like we said, the police sometimes just parks the car on the side of the road and everybody starts driving 120.
And then what?
Then everybody starts driving 120, but there's no one in the car. So similarly, is you can just give me a call and just be like, guys, this is somebody that will come to our company from time to time, and then people are aware of, oh, there might be fraudulent activity happening. What then that happens is you would also see a change in your data, in your reporting lines, because now that they're aware of somebody's going to look at them, they're trying to fix the fraudulent activity that they've made, and that's how you can pick it up without me having to physically go into the space. So sometimes awareness is not necessarily having a full-blown training, but just to make them aware that there is somebody looking at you. Yeah.
So one thing is to make people aware that somebody's watching them.
Yeah.
But then I'm sure there's more in terms of, please, Mr. Chief Risk Officer.
But I would say for small businesses with limited capabilities and budget, there's an ACFE institute. So Namibia has its own forensic institute. That forensic institute is more than willing to help educate, learn, teach. Then in the fraud institute, there's various fraud examiners that have their own businesses that can help with investigations. Some of the audit firms may even be interested in doing some of the work for lower fees. But any fraud leaves a trail. So then you have a police that is willing to help. You have the Financial Intelligence Center that can help with investigations. If it is involving a bank, the forensics departments of banks can help with the investigations. If it involves mobile technology, cell phones, MTC has a very good fraud department. They would probably be willing to help and supply with information. So I think the first step for that small business is to start asking for help, and the best place to start is probably with the ACFE.
Yeah, and I'm sure also, that's for detection, but for prevention, to have proper controls, like don't have one person be the one who places the orders, and those basic operational things is segregating duties so that the person who handles the cash is not the one who takes the orders, those kinds of things. But again, there are many organizations that are willing to help, small businesses and stuff. Yeah. All right. Do you want to add something?
No, I just want to, like the ACFE, they run various campaigns to help educate, and it's free of charge, and there are quarterly engagement sessions where businesses are invited.
That's so good.
So maybe we can post a link on your website.
Yeah, sure. Yes, we do have an MOU with them, so that's a really good point. Thank you. Are we good? Any other questions? Yes.
Very cool. I think we've made reference to various stakeholders from an assurance perspective in different businesses, whether it's people in ethics, internal audit, in risk management, or fraud specialists. And I'm curious to know what models perhaps have we found that are quite effective in bringing all of these different stakeholders together for the purpose of fraud prevention, fraud detection, and fraud reporting as well, given they obviously have their own unique views on fraud within an organization. How exactly do we best leverage all of these?
Yeah, we spoke about technology, the importance of technology, and really understanding how to bring all those data points together. But if you are not, if you're an organization that is not invested in technology, then call those meetings. That's part of a governance structure that you need to create, where you speak to your compliance manager, your internal audit manager, your risk manager, and forensics, and you start sharing information. It is also important that when different business units have their MANCO meetings or EXCO meetings, that you invite these risk people and compliance people. It is amazing, and I think Ralph shared a few examples. It is amazing when staff starts giving feedback about a complaint, or we used to use this pen and now we've changed and now we use this pen, but it is not really working for us and we don't understand why we've changed. The fraud or risk or compliance person, they start asking different questions. So it is really important to start sharing information and involving them.
Right.
That is, we also collaborate with different industries, because I remember back in my time we had a case which we then heard ACC was also working on the case, and since we know ACC was understaffed at that given point, we then requested them to hand over the documentation that they have at the point for us to fulfill our investigation and then somehow give our report back to them, and which will help them advance in their case. So sometimes it's not that we work in a bubble. We also have different engagements, and then also when you see the conferences that we also attend, is where you learn from different industries, where Bank of Namibia might be able to give us some data as to what's happening in the trade, because if you ask now how much fraud is what's the value of fraud within the country, if you Google it, you won't find it. But then when you go to a conference and somebody from Bank of Namibia presents something, then you're able to get the data. Then it opens up your mind of how big fraud is within the country. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Wow. Sure. Okay. So, as we're nearing, well, I don't know if we're nearing the end because we started a bit late. Apologies for that, by the way. I wanted to ask about anticipating future trends, fraud trends. And just like what emerging trends in corporate fraud should boards be proactively monitoring? And maybe just, with that, how can boards ensure they are prepared for new and evolving fraud risks in the global business environment? Yeah.
So I guess fraud can be grouped into three broad categories. So you get corruption, asset misappropriation, and financial statement fraud. By far the biggest is asset misappropriation. So within that, you normally apply your fraud risk assessment that gives you an idea of what frauds are most prevailing, and where you should focus. But if your business has a lot of cash, that's already a big hotspot.
Right.
The other hotspot is where your staff either take your stock or your assets, or they just abuse your assets. If you're a car rental company, they use your cars after hours, or for their own personal businesses. And if you are a micro lender of money, you probably find that your staff are competing with you on your own premises. But what we find in the financial industry is we use our actual data, and then we use our fraud risk assessment data, and together we compile a fraud risk profile, and that's what determines the strategy, is what are those big fraud items that we see happening or could happen potentially.
Would be your IA, because we use IA for doing our homework, doing our assignments.
IA or
AI.
All right.
Yeah,
Okay.
sorry.
Okay.
Yeah, so we use it for our homework and doing our assignments for us, helping us prepare speeches. But on the other hand, is you have hackers that use it to their advantage. There was something they said happened in Hong Kong, where a phishing email was sent to an employee, and the employee was from the CEO to the employee, and the employee was skeptical about the email, and decided to do a video call with the CEO. And she had a video call with the CEO, who was not the actual CEO.
Wow.
Yes, that's at the level that we are right now. So it's one of those things that we need to say is you also need to make the people aware of, from inside, that technology has moved into a space where even us as forensics investigators are having, I would not call it a problem, but to verify information will become a problem in the future. Because now, as you get to a point where I can do a video where I place you in a CCTV footage, but you physically were not in that place. So how do we verify
So how do we?
yeah. So
We're here for. We're talking about fraud detection.
yeah.
And we're talking about
So that is where we then upskill or try and learn from other professionals, because you'll get the forensics specialist, but you have your IT specialist on the other side. So that's where we collaborate with them
Yes,
and ask
100%.
them, since they work from an IT space, they know how the software from the other side. So what are the codes, I would say, to look at, to verify certain CCTV footage? Yeah. And then I would say the schemes will always be there. The names just change, but I think where we are right now is a new trend. I would say would be your employees.
Sorry?
Your employees.
New trend?
The new trend, I would say, would be employees.
Explain.
Because where we are right now, a lot of people are pressurized to live a certain lifestyle. So if you look back in the year, your parents would have told you, you must be loyal to your company, stay within your company. But nowadays, it's more about, I'm not getting paid enough.
right.
So that's a new trend for me that's in the making. So you need to find a way to balance it out. And one of the ways I would say is make the employees feel like they are part of the company, not that they work for the company.
Right.
So once they feel like they work for the company, what's the use that I make money for you? I can make money, like you said, they work against you.
Yeah, and I think that's where, like you said, collaboration, but having an integrated approach to business, so that you don't work in silos. Maybe you want to unpack that a bit more, so that like you said, work. Talk to HR, talk to wellness, your marketing, all of that. Should be working together to have a integrated approach.
Correct. But maybe just to add to what Ralph said, if we can maybe mention a few schemes directly that are really important in the financial industry. We talked about deep fakes, impersonating scams, but account takeovers is also huge. So they need to do some form of hacking or stealing of data, and they do it through the dark web. And that's why our clients, it is really important that you engage a vendor that have access to the dark web, that can review your data, what is available on the dark web. If your email has been compromised, change your passwords, change your email. If your banking were compromised, then there's certain steps to reset your passwords and change your card details. So we also saw the hackers access to cloud, and they call it cloud buckets, where they can access some of the clouds. We see social engineering schemes where they Some schemes are designed to build trust, and some schemes are designed to create fear. And we've heard a lot of clients that fall victim to these schemes of fear, and then they compromise their own data. And then I think the crypto and digital currency fraud schemes are also quite big in Namibia at the moment.
Wow.
Maybe just the last point on that one is the hackers have grown to a point where they now provide services where you can pay a hacker to hack someone, and you don't necessarily need to hack the stuff yourself. So you can actually go on the websites and hire a hacker, if you have to put it that way, and say, look, can you hack this company and find out this information for me? And then you ask yourself, if hackers are confident enough to do work for other people, what type of information is out there?
Yeah. But then how can boards ensure they're prepared for these evolving fraud risks, and like what should we do? Because this is what we hear, we're trying to educate. And not just boards, like, the audience talked about, just our small and medium enterprises. How can we do better? Or how can we protect ourselves or help ourselves?
Yeah, I think the first step is to make sure that you employ qualified, skilled people. That and it doesn't mean that today is a qualified, skilled people. They will be in 2 years' time have the right knowledge. So you need to build on that knowledge and keep it updated. We also talked about participating in the right industry forums, and there are forensic conferences that share a lot of valuable information, but there's also local forums, like for banks there's a forum with the police and the FIC where we share informations and trends, and similarly in insurance and in the auditors there are different forums that share information. And then invest in technology. That's the one way you make sure that you keep your entity up to date.
Right. That's good. Thanks.
Yeah, I would say is also do hacking tests within your own company, because usually we just check from the other side if our firewall is up to standard. But we call in an ethical hacker to try and hack us just to see where our loopholes are. So like I said, it's at the end of the day, vulnerability test. So at the end of the day, you need to somehow go outside, spend more money to save your money in the end. Yeah.
Okay. All right, I think we're coming to an end. Do we have any questions, any burning issues, anything from our online audiences? Nothing. It's the aggressive waving for me. Do we have any questions in the audience? No? Everybody happy? Hope you are not, everybody's scared to go out of their house now because of All right. So maybe as we're closing up, just final thoughts, things that you want to add, and maybe, I don't know, positive stories, things that you know of that you can share, success stories of fraud detection, exemplary boards, or maybe not so good boards, and then their final words.
I think if I talk from my experience, definitely the confidence of your investigations and the confidence of your risk team and your compliance team is really a reflection of the support they get from their board.
Right.
And so setting that tone at the high level, at the board, at the exco level is really important. And you can see that most companies, when they are successful, when they've built a brand, when they have trust, that is also a reflection of the culture, the tone that is being set. So maybe from an encouragement point of view, yes, board members and exco members do not underestimate the importance of communicating and talking about these important items.
Yeah, it's good. Mr. Uni?
Yeah,
Any final remarks?
It's always hard to say success stories because our success stories usually ends up with somebody going to jail or somebody being fired. That's within our space. But yes, there have been a few cases where it involved a lot of invoices and stuff. And like I said, some investigations can take up to 6 months because if it's physical invoices, you need to go invoice for invoice for invoice. But at the end of the day, you're happy that you can give a report to a company and tell them, no, this person must be fired, or you can then open up a case and try and recover your funds from the pension fund of this employee. And also it helps sustain the company from going on. And also the other helpful part is at least you came in at a part where you could have stopped the fraud scheme from continuing. Because I tell people, your average employee that's found doing fraudulent activity does the scheme about average 2 to 3 years, and still about within those 2 to 3 years about 3 million.
Sure.
Yes.
Okay, that's not helping our lives.
Yeah.
All right.
But,
Yeah.
but I think the good point that Ralph is raising is the fraud community and the support they're getting from their organizations and boards are really, when you catch these people, you actually help protect society.
Yeah.
100%.
So let's not underestimate the importance of it and the investment that is being made.
Right. That's really good. So, I mean, to sum up, it's the main thing is education. So, let's join these forums. Let's meet. Let's share information that we have. And culture is important. Like we say, culture will eat, your strategy for breakfast. So, if you want to improve the fabric of your organization, is to make sure the culture that you have. And again, I think to have an integrated approach to fraud detection and just in terms of culture, so that it isn't just the fraud department or the forensics department, but that we engage everyone. Yeah. So this was really, really good. I think we are nearing the end. The Namibian team, I can't see what they're indicating to me, but we are sort of at the end of our conversation, unless there are any final burning issues that you want to add.
No,
but this was really informative and really helpful. This was part 1 of Fraud in the Boardroom, and the week after next, on the 22nd, we'll continue with part 2, and we'll look at fraud in the evolving ESG environment and what that looks like. So we hope you learned some and that you're excited that you will find us again. And if you caught us halfway, you can find this on YouTube as well. And then for everyone else, remember that we are having our COSEC. You can still sign up for the Effective Company Secretary training that is happening next week, Thursday and Friday. And this is all from us. We are happy that you joined in, and we're happy for your support. We're really thankful to Alan Gray for sponsoring this winter series of the Fireplace Conversation. Thank you very much, everybody, and have a good night from us.
Thank you.
At the NIC.
Thanks.